Welcome to the Voices of Pueblo. Today's episode is brought to you by Katie Farmer and her Eccentrics class. Eccentrics is focused on increasing flexibility and strength, tone and shape of your body, improving posture, improving joint health, and rebalancing your body. Check out eccentricswithkatiefarmer.com for more information. Hello and welcome to the Voices of Pueblo podcast, brought to you by the Pueblo Star-Journal. I'm Ben Kaysen here with Elishevah Sepulveda. Ellie, how are you doing?
I'm doing great this morning. Thank you.
Oh my goodness. I'm so excited to have you over here. I'm doing well. Ellie, I got to meet her a few weeks ago. We, talked about her great new bakery that's coming called Seppy's, and she brought me some bread. So she brought me cinnamon with raisin and the deluxe with the Pueblo chilies in it. Oh my goodness. It was the hit of the party.
Great.
It was the hit of the party. It's called challah bread. So tell me about challah bread. What's so special about it?
Okay. Challah bread has been around since Moses in the tent of meeting. A lot of the Christian world knows it as the showbread. And so, we've been doing challah for a very, very long time, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon. It's not going to go away. And it's a staple in Jewish homes. I lived in the Jewish community up in Denver, up at Aish. And when you think about challah is everywhere in the Jewish community every day. And especially on the weekends when we have Shabbos or Shabbat or the Sabbath. There's challah when we light our candles and say our prayers on Friday night. And then when you get to the synagogue on Saturday morning and we have noshing/snacking after the services, there's challah there. And then we go to someone's house for Shabbat dinner and afternoon. And so the challah is there. And then when all of that's over and we go back to the synagogue to say goodbye to the Sabbath on Saturday evening, there's challah there again.
Wow.
So people eat it for breakfast. They like to make just the greatest and tastiest French toast you can ever think of.
Oh my goodness.
And so even the cinnamon raisin. So that variety is good for the breakfast. And the Pueblo chili is a big hit here in Pueblo.
I would imagine so.
I've sold I used to think that the cinnamon raisin was keeping stats. It was the favorite. But then when I pull out that Pueblo chili challah, boy, then they're neck and neck. So it's a toss up between which one's the favorite. And I sell a lot of both. So when I lived in the Jewish community in Denver, I hadn't invented the variety of Pueblo chili challah yet. So up there, it was the deluxe, the plain one. Okay. And I always tell people it's a shame to call it plain. I call it deluxe because it's so good that if you call it plain, you might hurt its feelings. So,
well, I agree.
Anyway, so those two were the favorite varieties up when I lived up in Denver. And I do a chocolate chip too, which a lot of people really like. And then somebody suggested to me one time, why don't you put cherries in it? So then I started doing the chocolate chip with cherries in it. And that became very famous. And when I start, it's kind of funny. It goes in spurts. If I do one particular variety, then everyone starts ordering that one. And then pretty soon it kind of dies off and they move to something else. And then, it's interesting the way it ebbs and flows in favoritism of the varieties at different times.
Gotcha.
So, when you think about challah bread has always been bread for sharing. And I love your article where you called it sharing bread, right? So that's been the way it's always been. And when we make it, it's braided, and you don't necessarily ever take a knife to it. You just tear it off. And I think that part of the design originally, I think that was the thought behind it. People are going to share it. And so when we all get around in a circle and say our prayers on Shabbat and pray for the bread, there's a prayer that we pray for the bread before we eat it. And everybody holds hands, touches the plate that it's on, whoever can put their hand on the plate, and then someone puts their hand on that person's shoulder. And so it's a community thing. And so when we say that prayer all together, and then we all partake of that bread, people are just tearing a little piece off, or you tear a piece off and you share it with the person next to you.
Yeah.
It's bread for sharing. And that was originally Rudy Organic Breads out of Boulder, who is Sheldon Romer. He's the founder and he was the creator of Rudy's. He had the contract with King Soopers before. Sold 80% of Rudy's, so then decided to make a decision not to produce the challah for Rudy's anymore because he was not going to be there to make it. In the Jewish world, you have to be Jewish to make challah. And
explain that to me. That's interesting.
And my roots are Sephardic. We came from Spain and Portugal, and like 1492 and then 1495 and then on to the New World. So we brought challah with us, of course. And so the challah has always been a part of what we do as a community. And we like to share it with everybody that we can. And when Sheldon had Rudy's, that was his tagline, bread for sharing. So I really, when I first stumbled upon this opportunity, which was kind of a fluke thing, but I read up on Sheldon and Rudy's on the internet, and it said that he was giving like 1,000 pounds of bread away. And I can't remember if it was every week or every month in Boulder County.
That's incredible.
For us as Jews, always thinking about doing benevolence and doing what we call tikkun olam, repairing the world, whatever we can do to make the world a happier, better place. That's what we do. And so Sheldon, his benevolence was like 1,000 pounds of bread. And I don't remember, like I said, if it was per week or per month.
Wow.
But when I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, I want to be that guy.
Yeah.
So it's very important to us in many ways. The challah represents community. It represents sharing. It represents who we are as Jews, and always trying to do tikkun olam by, feeding people, giving somebody something to eat. We believe that if you see a hungry person, they may be angry with God because they're hungry. And to give them something to eat makes peace between them and God, which is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And so for me, there's a lot of my passion in doing what I do is all to do with my Jewish beliefs and heritage and about making the world a better place.
That's so cool. Was that focus for you kind of always there within this process, or is that something that's grown as you've gotten older?
Yes,
yeah. Tell me about it.
It's always been there. I remember sitting in Sheldon's office at his home several years ago. And he said to me, he says, well, I understand your heart, he says, and how you really want to do this and you really want to make it available to the Jewish community. He says, but you got to make money. If you're going to do this, you got to make money too, because it has to be sustainable.
Yeah.
Without money, it can't be sustainable. So you have to make sure that if you're going to do it, you have to make money doing it, because you can't give anything away if you don't have it to give away. So you got to make money. Yeah. I was like, okay. So it was always my heart to be the supplier of challah, but it's been quite a journey and a learning curve for me to do it, to make money doing it, so that I could be able to
bless others that way.
Have the ability to give benevolence. Yes.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. So you mentioned it's been kind of a long journey. We've got kind of a fun thing coming. So you've got a building now. You're getting ready to open up there. I know we had talked about April, hopefully, but talk to me about what's the journey been from the start of you making challah to now being like, okay, we're getting ready to open up the store. What's happened during that run? And tell me about the store.
Oh, you want the story? Oh my gosh, it's so much. Because I got the opportunity in 2002, October, from King Soopers.
Yeah.
Gene Tapio was the bakery buyer then. And so this is kind of how it happened. My son, who was a middle school student at the time at Pitts, they had Culture Day. And he offered that he would bring challah. And he told me on Thursday night at 10 p.m. and and he needed it for first hour the next morning.
On Friday, yeah.
And so I knew that was not a possibility because it takes at least 5 hours to make challah.
Oh, yeah.
So I told him, I'll go to King Soopers in the morning and I'll get some for you. So I went first to the north side store, then I went to the south side store, and neither store had any. But at both stores, they said to me, well, do you know why we're not getting it? Because this lady, here, let's give you her phone number and you can call her and ask her why we're not getting it. And I said, well, okay, thank you. And I took the phone number and shoved it in my purse, politely accepted it, thinking, I'm never going to call this lady.
You're like, come on.
I just didn't think why would I call her, right?
Yeah.
So I called the teacher instead and I said, well, there's none to be had in Pueblo, so can he bring it tomorrow? She said, yeah, sure. So I made challah for him. He took it to school and on Tuesday, and he came home from school and he said to me, hey, Mom, by the way, he says, I think you ought to know that your challah caused a riot in the school cafeteria today. And I couldn't imagine, why would it cause, and I'm looking at him and I'm asking him, what, why? And he says, well, he said, here's what happened. He said, it was already lunchtime and the kids who had it in first hour had their utensils in their hands and they were pounding their fists on the table, screaming, we want challah bread. We hate hot dogs. We want challah bread. We hate pizza. And so when he got to pizza, I thought he's just kidding around, right? And I thought he was being cute and funny. So I played with his hair and I said, yeah, real cute, Danny. And he walked away looking back at me and he was like, honest, Mom. And I'm like, yeah, okay. And so that was kind of the end of that. And not a half an hour later, the newspaper boy, Matt, was at our door to collect for the newspaper. And so he came into the house and then he asks me, Mrs. Sepulveda, by the way, do you have any more of that challah bread that you sent to school today? And I said, oh, no, Matt, I'm sorry. All that I made, I sent to the school. And he said, well, I think you should know it caused a riot in the school cafeteria today. And I was like, whoa, and my then husband, he turned and he looked at me. He said, when are you going to do this? I said, I don't know. Maybe I should look into it. So I knew that the challah was good. Because when I would make it on the weekend that it was my weekend to take it, there would be a stampede. Everybody was like, they wanted to get there first and make sure they got some, right?
Yep.
And so people would call me and ask me, do you have more or will you make some for me? And I knew it was good, but I didn't have any clue how really good it was. I just knew it was good, right? And there's a funny episode too. We had a celebration. It was a high holy day. And I think it was Rosh Hashanah when we eat sweet things. So I decided to create one that had cherries in it. And so I made this challah with the cherries in it. And I made an extra one for us at home. So my husband and the kids ate it all. And we were getting ready to go to the festivity. And I had one to take there. And he was waving this $100 bill around at me. Please, don't take it. I'll give you this $100 bill for it. Please don't take it. And I was like, no, I promised it. I have to take it. And he was like, here, trying to get me to take this $100 bill.
Yeah. I
said, no, I'm not going to take it. I'm taking it to the shul. And he was like, okay. Well, I said, put your money away. I don't want it. So that was the end of that. But so I knew it was good. And one guy even came up to me and said, you want to know something about your challah? And I said, what? He said, I dream about your challah. I said, I looked at him like,
it's good right there.
Heads, right?
Yeah.
And I just couldn't fathom, like, this guy is dreaming about my challah. That's like crazy, right? And I was like, well, that's nice, Michael. Thank you for telling me that. And I walked away and I was shaking my head thinking, how crazy is that? So flash forward to the opportunity. So after my husband said, when are you going to do this? I said, well, I think I'll look into it. So I called Jean Tapia the next day and we made arrangements for me to take samples up the following Friday.
For King Soopers and
to King Soopers on Tejon.
Yeah.
And in Denver there. And I knew that I was just going to be dropping it off and I would not be meeting with her because she told me, I won't be meeting with you because corporate's going to be here that day. And I said, well, okay. She said, so if you just drop it off,
I'll taste it and I'll let you know.
Somebody will bring it up to me. And I said, okay. So I went in and I had no idea how significant it was that the corporate folks from Cincinnati, Ohio, Kroger were at that King Soopers that day. No idea. So I go there to drop the bread off, and I told the receptionist I'm here and who I am and what I have and what I'm doing there. And she said, okay, somebody will come down and get it from you and have a seat over there. So I was waiting and 45 minutes passed and it's already like 4:00, right? And I'm thinking, this is good because I worked in offices for many, many years. And I know like at 4:00, everybody's getting hungry, right? Yep. And so I thought, this is good. I'll go ask her now what happened. And so I went up and I said, gosh, nobody came down for the bread. And she said, oh my gosh, they didn't come down for it. I said, no. She said, I'll get somebody out here right away. And so somebody came down and I watched him go up the stairs with the bread, and I walked out the door, got my car, headed south. And when I got to the Lincoln Avenue exit, my cell phone started ringing and I look at it and caller ID, Jean Tapia. And I answer, hello, Jean. And she says, little lady, she said, do you know what you have? And I said, challah. And she started laughing. She said, no. She said, let me tell you something. She said, my ex-husband is Jewish. She said, I've had challah all over the United States. I've had it from big stores, little stores, people's homes, big corporations, small corporations, on the shelves and different stores and at people's homes. And she said, I even had challah in Israel. She said, never in my life have I had challah this good. And I was sitting there and I pulled the phone away from my ear and I was looking at the phone like, what did she just say?
Is this real?
Yeah. It was like, to me, shocking, so surprising, Yeah. And so then I put the phone to my ear and I said, well, all that I have right now is my kitchen stove at home. Yeah. Will you give me time to get it up and running? And she said, we will work with you. And work with me, she did. And so it was like 9 months to the day from that phone call that I sent out my first shipment of kosher certified bread to the King Soopers folks. And it had to be kosher certified, of course, because it's challah, right? Yeah. And Jean emphasized that customers would not buy it if it, Orthodox Jews would not buy it if it was not kosher certified. Yeah. So I knew nothing at that point about getting the kosher certification.
Yeah. Tell me about that. What was that process like? And what do you have to do for the shop now?
So, so I told Jean, gee, I know nothing about getting kosher certification. And she said, call Lou Pasco. He's the kosher gatekeeper here at King Soopers Kroger. And so I called Lou and he said, call these guys. And he gave me the number of the Va'ad, what we call the Va'ad, the kosher certifying agency. And he gave me their information and I called them. And Rabbi Ross Cam was wonderful. And it was interesting to be a person who was already involved in the genealogical aspect of being a Sephardic Jew. And I had joined a website called Sephardim.com. And Harry Stein, of blessed memory, he was from Tucson, Arizona, and he was a retired military man. And he had created the Sephardim.com website. And I had been with that for a while, probably a couple of years or better. And I was a forum member, and we have huge libraries at home that we would buy books from the internet, anything that had to do with being able to retrace our roots. And so there were people who were writing to us from all over the world, trying to retrace their roots back to Spain, to the Iberian Peninsula. Interesting. And they would write to us and we would look in our books and try to help them retrace their roots. Well, now we have DNA. So I was spending a lot of time doing that already. So when I began communications with the Va'ad in Denver with Rabbi Roskamp, there was a lot of discussion about my possible roots between myself and him. I never forget when I was actually open and producing for King Supers already, and Rabbi Roskamp came to the facility, and he was asking me about what I knew of or remembered of, or what practices we had from that might have been passed down to us from our Jewish roots. And we were standing there, and I was cracking some eggs, and I told him, for instance, I said, in cracking the eggs, we always check the eggs for blood. I said, my mom would always, if the egg had blood in it, she would throw it away and then wash the container that she was using and start all over again. And I said, she also very, very occasionally, hardly ever, but once in a while, she would close all the curtains on the house, and she had some scarves, which she never wore. She never wore scarves, but the only time she wore, and she had a drawer full of them, but never wore them. And the only time she would ever wear them was when she did this weird thing. It was candle lighting, and she would close all the curtains. And I saw her, I can remember like 3 times growing up, close the curtains and have a scarf on her head, and then light the candles. And she had I still have one of her candle holders. They were glass. They were white milk glass, grapevine and leaf pattern. And she would put candles in those candle holders, and she would do this little wavy thing, what I called the wavy thing. She did this wavy thing. And then she would cover her eyes, and she would say, I light the candles because my mother lit the candles, and her mother before her, and her mother before her. And that's all that I can say. And when I told him that, he literally had tears in his eyes. And I didn't realize back then what I know now from all the research and the groups that I'm involved in on the internet that have to do with us retracing our roots back to the Iberian Peninsula and the things that our ancestors experienced in that journey, and the conversions taking place, and people having to hide their Jewish roots in order to survive, because people were burned alive at the Auto de Fe. They were held in Lisbon. They were held in Spain. They were held in Monterrey, and in Mexico City. And people were burned alive at the Auto de Fe for admitting, or someone thinking, even suspecting, that they might have Jewish roots. And that was only if they had converted to the Catholic Church. If they weren't converted, they weren't bothered. But if they had converted, they were never treated as equals to because Spain wanted a purely Catholic country. Yeah. And so everyone who was not a Catholic, especially the Jews, had to get out of the country or convert or be burned alive at the Auto de Fe. Those were the only 3 choices. Very sad.
Yeah.
And so today I have relatives who are still Catholics. I have relatives that are Christians, and I love every one of them, and I respect their beliefs. If they want to be Christian or Catholic, whatever they believe, I respect their beliefs, because we've come along. How many years has that been since 1492 and 1495? We're not the same people now that we were back then. And a lot of people here and now don't even know the history of the things that took place back then and in the interim. So none of us in this day and age can be held accountable for what happened in the past, of course, in any aspect of the world. And so it goes with that too. And so a lot of my passion has to do with the significance of the challah. And my tagline for the challah is, it's beautiful, marvelously tasty, beautiful bread for the body and soul. So, it has its spiritual connection as well as its delicious connection. And so people love the challah for just how beautiful it is and how good it tastes. Yeah. but it also, for those of us who have that spiritual connection to us, it's a little bit more. It's a lot more.
Special thanks to Katie Farmer for supporting nonprofit news in Pueblo, Colorado. Katie's Eccentrics class is a dynamic, full-body workout that combines stretching and strengthening, all while engaging all 650 muscles. This class is available to adults of all ages and of all fitness abilities. Classes are offered at the Sangre de Cristo Arts and Conference Center and at Pueblo City Park. Please check out eccentricswithkatiefarmer.com for more information. That makes total sense, man. That's so cool. So for those of us who may not know much about kosher, that side of it, what does that mean spiritually or just like in generally to you?
In general, kosher means cleanliness.
Okay.
So the word kosher itself translates from the Hebrew to the word fit.
Okay.
What's fit for eating? Something, if it's fit, it not only has to be nutritious, but it also has to be clean and not something that you would eat that might make you sick or kill you.
Yeah.
Right. So a long time ago, the rabbis decided to separate our meat and our dairy meals because they found that because the utensils back then were wooden, the bacterias from the meat and the cheese or dairy products would get embedded into the wooden utensils and plates and things. And so then those two bacteria mixing together are very bad. And it can make a person very sick, or it could even kill a person. So the rabbis decided back then, we're going to separate those meat meals and those dairy meals, and we're going to eat meat on the same plates all the time and use those utensils. And we'll separate the dairy utensils and plates and whatever cooking utensils that we use, pots and pans, I mean, everything. So in a Jewish home, if you're kosher, and I am, and if you go in my kitchen, the drawers are marked, the silverware is marked meat or dairy and parve for the others. And in the shelves are marked too. I have separate sets of dishes for the meat and the dairy meals.
Okay.
And so that's the way that we do things at our homes and whatnot. Now, when you're talking about the food industry, and I looked at I shared the stat with you at that point. We're looking at 2017 information, and I need to go look at what the current stuff is. But in 2017, we were 60% kosher foods were 60% in the entire store of all the national retailers. 60%. And why? That's interesting. Why would that all be kosher certified? Because of the cleanliness standards, which supersede those of the FDA and the USDA. And so when the national retailers started to realize that the foods that they were bringing in that were kosher certified, they weren't having any foodborne illness problems, issues, lawsuits, right?
Yeah.
So by requiring a kosher certification, those foodborne illness lawsuits took a nosedive. And so they started requiring more and more of the newer companies as they would come in to make sure that they were kosher certified. And it's a great way to do business because when you lie down and go to sleep at night, you know that whatever you sent out of your manufacturing plant will not make somebody sick or kill anybody.
Yeah.
And so the recalls too. I mean, we all have to have insurance in case we have a recall to cover us for our losses.
Yeah.
But in the kosher world, we should have a lot less issues with that, or practically none.
Yeah.
They should be zero. Due to the fact that the cleanliness standards are so high, all the machineries, the floors, if you go in and look at those machines, they have to be immaculate all the time. There can't be handprints and greasy old handprints on things. And if you go in, there can't be flour spilled and left on the floor. It has to be cleaned up right away.
Yeah.
It just is a whole different world. I had a friend when I lived in Denver who worked for a baking company, a big baking company, and I'm not going to mention who it was, but he was a manager there, foreman, supervisor, and they tried to go kosher, and they had been not producing in a kosher way for so many years. They were just used to doing things the way they did them.
Yeah.
And he said that making the transition was just really hard for them. And they bailed. They bailed out.
Gotcha. Sad
so,
not to do that.
you know, that's why now the national retailers, if they have a new company with a new product coming in, they're like, okay, you have to get kosher certified for us to sell your product.
Wow.
And so then that's how we got to 60% now on the shelves.
Man, that's cool. Well,
it's been a process.
Yeah. So, you know, back to kind of your story when it comes to opening up the shop. So you get kosher certified, you're in King Supers for a while. And then I know from talking to you before, then that ended for a little while. And now you've been on the journey of building it back up and starting it again.
Right. 3.5 years.
Yeah.
And then,
tell me about it.
So I was out of it for a while. And so after, the building I was in closed down.
Yeah.
And, I was leasing space in there. So, I was like, well, okay, what do I do now? Right. Well, I'll just make myself be better at what I do. And so I went to work at getting my, lean manufacturing certifications. I went to school to get an RFP certification from the Denver Office of Economic and International Trade, Economic Development, the DOED. I always have to try to figure. I've been saying DOED for so long, I forgot what it all means. Denver Office of Economic Development and International Trade. So
that's quite the acronym.
Yes. And the RFP it stands for Request for Proposals. So in order to do business with the government, which I can, and sell to the government, to the military or to the prison systems. There are a lot of people in the prison systems who have discovered that the foods are much better if they say they only eat kosher, then they get better foods.
That's smart.
So you know, and in an environment like that, word gets around real fast, right? So then they're like, you know, we really need to bring in more kosher foods. So there's a possibility for doing business with the government in that aspect. And
interesting.
So it's interesting. And I used to supply the Colorado State Hospital, the Colorado Mental, what is it? The Colorado Mental Health Institute at Pueblo. Always have to come with
another acronym. Another acronym.
So anyway, I used to do business with them too. So there are a lot of government facilities and schools, you know, things of that sort. There's a lot of business to be done. And so in order to do that, you have to go to the classes and find out how it all works. And you could be a subprime, but never a prime when you first start. And, it's, you have codes, all those government codes, and you have to figure out, according to your code of what you do, what are those codes that you would have to use in order to do business with the government to sell your product? Wow. And it's a very intense, it was many
I can see why that takes education.
Yeah, it was many
weeks. That's a lot going on.
It was many weeks of driving to Denver for those classes.
Yeah.
And then they also had a wonderful representative who would come down here. Oh, she's a wonderful lady. And she has her own business now too. She does this sort of thing, Shannon. She came down twice a week to meet with me here in Pueblo so that she could school me on how all of that works. And it was quite an education. And so I did get my certificate. And right at the beginning of the pandemic, when it was getting really bad, was when we had our last class. So I did my last one online. I didn't go to Denver.
Yep.
So it's been a journey.
That is a journey.
Yeah. And there's been a lot of other things that I've had to learn a lot too. And things I participated in the interim too. I was part of the technology group out of Boulder, and we created a software program by which food manufacturers could go from idea to launch. And that's a big journey within itself. And when somebody has a food product and they want to start manufacturing it, how do you do that, right? Yeah. How do you get from just your idea to actually shipping it out of a building? It's a major journey. There's so many rules and regulations, city, government, of the state, of the federal stuff. I'm have a registered trademark with the USPTO, the United States Office of Patent and Trade. So that was a journey in itself too. That took a year. It took a year to get a registered trademark.
Wow.
And you have to have money too. You have to have a lot of money to always be paying for this and paying for this inspection, that inspection, this certificate, that certificate. It's a lot of expense. And it takes a lot of perseverance to get to where I am now. I'm not even open yet.
Yeah.
We're working with DK Horn Engineering, and they are doing the planning of the building. And I have an electrician, Mark Bensick, and then there's Orlando Vigil, who's the plumber. So they've all met with me this week. We've been down at the building. That's been really exciting.
And that's so exciting.
So they're making multiple trips over there and doing whatever they can to help me get this up and running. And I'm probably going to be open after Passover. I'm thinking it's not going to be, because here's what happens with a kosher business right before Passover, especially my challah,
for bread.
Right?
Yeah.
So everything has to be what we call koshered. And that means the rabbi comes in with his 600-degree torch and a spray bottle. And you have stainless steel machines and everything that you're using, right? So these things can actually be sterilized. And that's what koshering is. So they take that torch and that spray bottle and the whole entire machine or table or whatever it is, right? Everything that is in there gets koshered. And so that's expensive, because you have to pay them for their work when they come down to do that. And then if they're traveling, there's traveling expenses. And what if they have to stay in a motel overnight? I've been fortunate that they've been really good. Scroll K out of Denver, the Vaad. They've been wonderful to me because they knew I was small and I was just trying to get started. Right.
Yeah.
So when they would come down to inspect the prisons and the state hospital and the bigger facilities where they would have to stay overnight, then, those folks were paying for their overnight stay and they didn't charge me for their overnight stays. So they've been really good to me and I really enjoy working with them. So there's a lot to it and it's quite a journey in itself. And I have to tell you this story too, talking about stories all the time. So being a Sephardic Jew and knowing how difficult it can be to be accepted by the local synagogue or the Jewish community or the rabbi who's in charge of the synagogue, you can't just say, I'm Jewish. And you have to be able to prove that you're Jewish. So the day that the certificate came in the mail and my granddaughter was there with me and she was just in elementary school at the time. And I see on the outside of the envelope, the return address, it's from the Scroll K of Denver. Scroll K Va'ad HaKashrus of Denver, Colorado. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's my certificate. And I knew that they had told me on the phone already by phone that I was
accepted,
going to be certified, right? Good. So I already knew this, but here it comes in the mail and I open it and much to my surprise, the first sentence on the certificate said, as a Jewish business owner. And it was absolute elation. And I said to my granddaughter, look, Lexi, I said, we've been validated. We've finally been validated. And I broke down in tears and we were dancing a dance that in the Jewish world we do called the Hora. And it's a fun dance, and it's a circle kind of dance and everybody's connected and you all do it around the room. And so when I read that to Lexi and she saw how happy I was and she was happy and we danced around the room until we couldn't dance anymore and we fell back onto the sofa and we were just laughing and just elated, just happy, And then she said to me something was really amazing for a child to say. She was about 8 years old at the time, maybe. And she said to me, you know what, Mima? She said, I'm always going to remember this day. She said, and I'm going to tell my children and they're going to tell their children.
Wow.
I said, yes. And they'll tell their children too. And it was just because it was amazing that she said that, because in the Jewish world, we believe in something we say all the time, Lador Vador, which means from generation to generation. So you think of it could be from generation to generation. No, from one generation, you just keep telling these things. And so for me, it was that Lador Vador moment, and how my 8-year-old granddaughter instinctively knew that, I don't know. But now she has 2 children, and they're my great grandchildren. And so it's amazing to still be alive and to pass things down for any culture, any person in any culture. We have indigenous roots too, 48% in our family. And we know all the story in the background and the history, and we have the documentation about that too. So I'm not only Jewish, but I'm indigenous. So it's an amazing thing to know and follow your culture as much as you can in this year that we're in 2024, and in the 1900s, even from 1990 this way, to always try to embrace that and learn what I can about it, and still be part of this society now here, and be a person who contributes to our society and contributes to our community and contributes to the world that we live in. Just being who I am right now. I know where I came from, but who I am right now is most important than anything for any person from any culture, and living here in the world now, in 2024.
That's so good.
What do we bring to the table as persons, as individuals? That is so important.
Well, I think on that topic, I think my last question for you is, why Pueblo? Why did you start it here in Pueblo? Why this community? Why do we want to start Seppy's here?
Well, I'm a native Puebloan. I've lived other places. I've lived in Greeley. I've lived in Denver. I've lived in Boulder. I've lived in Los Angeles. I managed a dental office in Beverly Hills when I lived in Los Angeles. I could have stayed there. Oh my goodness. I was making great money back then, $36 an hour. And that was back in 78 and 79. That was a lot of money back then. And I could have stayed there, but we're ping pongs, people from Pueblo. We go other places, but we come back. And why do we come back? Because the people in Pueblo, I have to say that I had been offered by the DOED in Denver, and I've been offered by Colorado Springs, the Office of Economic Development there too. And in Aurora. I mean, other places have wanted me to build this in their towns. And no, because if I'm going to create jobs, if I'm going to do something really significant in the world, I want to do it here in Pueblo, in my hometown. I have 90 family members just from my dad down. And so I have a lot of family members. I only have 2 daughters who live in Houston. One moved there 20 years ago, and the other one followed a few years later. And so I have, 2 daughters with their families in Houston. 4 of my grandchildren live in Houston, and everybody else is here. They're all here. And I have so many cousins, and I mean, just a huge family here in Pueblo. This is home. If I'm going to do anything that's going to be significant in the world, I'm going to do it here. And I'm a member of the Pueblo Food Project. I'm a member of Good Business Colorado out of Denver, of Colorado Proud out of Denver, a lot of organizations here. If I'm going to do anything, and I wanted to join the chamber here and the Latino chamber as well, and haven't done it because I couldn't afford to in the past, but now I can. And so the more of a member of our community that I can be, the more I'm going to do that. And I've been with the Pueblo Food Project since 2018 in its inception. And it's very important to me. It's very important to me because we live in a food desert in the Rocky Mountain region. And in Colorado, yes, we're a food desert. And all our foods come from the East and West Coast and from the South Coast. And we were saying in the beginning of the Pueblo Food Project, myself and a couple other people, well, we're a food desert here. And a lot of people didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
And so we told them, if ever we get cut off from the coasts, all this food that is on our shelves in our grocery stores now, in 3 days, we will be without food. If we get cut off from the coast for some reason. And then when the pandemic happened and I walked into not Whole Foods, but into Sam's Club and saw the bare shelves in there, I had goosebumps from the top of my head down to my toes. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's happening. It's happening. And it was the reality of what we knew could possibly happen. And we need to build more food manufacturing here in Pueblo and here in Colorado and here in the Rocky Mountain region, because we saw what happened then. We don't want that to happen again. A lot of us who are in food, that's why we're doing what we're doing, because we need to build food manufacturing in this region.
That's awesome. Well, if somebody's listening to this podcast and wants to connect with you, get some of your bread, or just help in the project as you get ready to open and get more information, how can they follow you?
They can follow me on Facebook. I'm on Facebook under Seppy's Challah Breads. I have a website, seppyskosher.com.
Okay.
I have a phone number for the bread company now. It's 719-664-2042. New number. I'm still trying to remember it. And and my personal cell phone, 719-281-0995. They can always get a hold of me that way, or they can pop in at the shop. It's at 131 Broadway, right next door to the Broadway Tavern, which is a historic place in Pueblo. Most people know that, over by the main library on the Mesa Junction. And it's a great neighborhood. I feel really welcome there. And that's how they can find me that way.
Good. Yeah. Well, I know we talked about it a little bit in the article, but what are the breads that you offer if somebody's trying to come and get some bread?
Okay. So right now, we're doing deluxe, which is the plain one, and the cinnamon raisin, and the Pueblo chili. And we also do the chocolate chip, and we do chocolate chip with the cherries in it.
Okay.
And those are the 5 varieties that we do.
That's amazing. Well, that's super cool. Well, Ellie, thank you so much for coming in. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Ben.
And I wish you the best of luck in getting everything started. I can't wait to see the storefront and get everything going on that. But I mean, even now, I'm just proud of you and the way you've been able to push through everything.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben.
A lot of adversity, and you can tell how much you believe in it.
Yes. Thank you, Ben. And I wish you all the best too.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. Well, for Ben and Ellie, thank you so much for listening. This has been the Voices of Pueblo, brought to you by the Pueblo Star-Journal. Have a great rest of your day. Today's episode of Voices of Pueblo is brought to you by Katie Farmer and her Eccentrics class. Eccentrics is a low-impact, equipment-free class that's perfect for men and women. Eccentrics will leave you feeling energized, youthful, and healthy. You can contact Katie at 719-470-3017 or visit her website, eccentricswithkatiefarmer.com, for more information.